everybody. I hope everyone had a wonderful long weekend. We are back for Let's Do Lunch, and today is Tuesday, which is our Future of Entertainment Day, and we have a terrific show for you, which I'll introduce in just a minute. As a reminder, folks, we're going to be doing the show through the end of next week, and then we'll be taking a break for part of the summer, and then we'll be resuming the show. But we have a lot of great shows in store for you this week and next week. You can check our schedule online at doexpo.com. All right, just as some folks have already been doing, please introduce yourself in the chat. When you do it, make sure to change the drop down from all panelists to all panelists and attendees so that everybody can see your introductions. We love to see who's here. We always get a great crowd for these shows. So on Tuesdays, as I mentioned, we always do a show about the future of entertainment. This one is particularly interesting because this is a really cutting edge company that I've had the pleasure of working with over the years. We have on the show today, Chang Kim. Chang is CEO of Tapas Media. Welcome, Chang.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me, Ned.
Yeah, great to have you here. And our moderator for today's show is David Bloom. David is a contributor at Forbes, Tubefilter, TVRev, the editorial extraordinaire, David Bloom. Welcome to the show.
Hey. Welcome, everybody. Glad to be back, though not necessarily back from my 3-day non-weekend. It was actually 2 days working and 1 day screwing off, but I was in Hawaii, so I can't complain before. So I'm making up for it by actually working on the holiday when you guys are all, I hope, hitting beaches and doing things. But as part of that, I was talking to the esteemed Mr. Chang Kim about Tapas Media, getting ready for today's conversation, and there is a lot to talk about. Again, I want to strongly encourage you guys to make like the chat room is what we'd be doing if we were in person and handing out business cards and saying, hey, here's what I'm looking for, here's who I am, here's what I do, blah, blah, blah. Use that. Use the Q&A section, ask questions, I'll work them in, I'll give you a shout out, I'll work them into the conversation with Chang. Just to get started, first of all, I'll put my connectors, if you want to get that, that's in the chat room. You can find how to track me down. Make sure it's to panelists and attendees. And beyond that, let's start, Chang. Welcome, sir. And let's just talk about, to begin with, what the heck Tapas Media is. I hear tapas, I say I'm going to Spain and I'm having little bowls of food. This is actually a company that's now owned by a Korean company. So Tapas, maybe not exactly the name they go with. Banchan? Shouldn't it be Banchan Media? Just asking.
Your research, or do you speak Korean?
I pick up an amazing amount of different languages here in Los Angeles, and it's part of my joy. So
that's true. Yeah, obviously tapas, right? So it's like a bite-sized food. And, the funny story is, so we're like, bite-sized short content media company. And then when we started the company bank account, at Bank of America, the person was like, I was trying to explain what we do, but then she's like, oh, yeah. And then at the end of the process, she's like, oh, congratulations on your restaurant. And we're not in the food business at all. The meaning there is, I would say it's similar to Quibi, like Quibi.
Hey, we shouldn't say that though. but Tapas Media, actually, you should be doing food media though, because that's clearly a huge business as part of all the things you guys are doing, right? So, but anyway, so you're a little bit like the late lamented Quibi is what we're saying here.
Yeah. So yeah, short bite-sized content. So that's the meaning behind Tapas. What we do is, we're building a platform and community for storytellers, people who tell their stories and create original IP, story IP in the form of digital comics and novels. So, digital comics and novels, great way to build story IP. One person, two people, very small team can create the entire story. So we really believe in the power of one-person media. There's so many out there. There's YouTube, there's TikTok, and a lot of other stuff, and obviously Clubhouse. There's different ways to build your brand, but digital comics, novels, we think that this is a great way to build stories. If you think about Harry Potter, if you think about basically everything, it's typically done by one person. Like Harry Potter, just like one person's idea, and they built a franchise. So what we're doing is to build a platform and community for storytellers who want to build, that kind of story IP franchise. On the consumer side, obviously, we're one of the top grossing, one of the top digital comic apps in the US. Our user base is, so we have 3.7 million monthly active users. Our user base is typically 18 to 24 female, like 70% female, and in the US. So, David, you and I are not exactly the target users of Tapas, but
what do you mean? I know, I can't believe you said that. I am often mistaken for an 18-year-old girl. No, okay. But occasionally, because I look really good in high heels. But this is interesting because what you're talking about is a target audience. It's not that different. I think it's a better fit, not Quibi, because you aren't as much video as you are user-generated, more text-based and still image content. You're a little closer to Wattpad, which is your pals with, right? But it feels to me like it's closer to that UGC, ardent fans, a younger, heavily female skewing audience. That feels more on target in some ways.
Yes, exactly. So Wattpad, Webtoon, Radish, these are kind of similar companies in our space, but there's just like a new crop of companies that are trying to tackle this mobile storytelling space, serialized storytelling that's really optimized for mobile consumption. There's a lot of movements happening there. So obviously for the consumers, everybody consume their stories on the phone these days. So the millennials and Gen Z, everybody's consuming content on the phone. So how do we optimize the phone reading? So like we're talking about the serialized, bite-sized. So like when you're reading a story on the phone, you could theoretically read like a 350-page novel in one sitting by the beach. The traditional kind of book publishing model, that's possible, but for the phone reading is more optimized around this like short bite-sized time you have. Like, obviously now it's COVID, so a lot of people are staying inside, but when people are traveling or out in the world, then you have like 5 minutes of time, 7 minutes of time when you're waiting for your train, or when you're commuting, or when you're in a queue somewhere. You have this like a bite-sized time. So the idea is, hey, can we publish stories in a serialized episodic manner, optimize around those like 5 minutes of time so that people can wait for the next episode coming out. So
there's a couple of things. I remember interviewing, and again, I actually am not an 18-year-old girl. I am a somewhat older male, but with a fading memory. But I remember interviewing a company that was doing really interesting stuff with reformatting comics. So for the mobile space, so they would do either a single panel in a whole screen's worth, or they might stack them instead of having them side by side, and then you would flip through. It was a nice interface. Are you all doing some of that? Are they creating with that in mind? Because to me, that's both completely on point. It's like what Instagram did with vertical video, not Instagram, Snapchat did with vertical video, and Instagram copied. But adapting an older model for the vertical formats of video. So are you all doing that as well as trying to keep it truncated to a short bite kind of approach?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so our thesis, our belief is that whenever you have a new medium, the content has to be created for that new medium in the first place. Sometimes you can bring the content from another medium and then kind of adapt that. So we do those adaptations or reformatting sometimes, but then the majority of the content is being created for the medium in the first place. And yeah, fundamentally, I think the medium, like when you have a different medium, it's like if you think about YouTube, if you think about TikTok and all the other content platform, then typically it's like the people who create the stories for that particular medium. It's like a typically different crop of people who come in, not necessarily the traditional sort of like, hey, this person was popular in TV or whatever older medium, and then these people transition over to YouTube or TikTok, but it's like different way, like a whole different people come in, and then these are the people who thoroughly understand the specifics of this new medium, and then they're
They're
producing.
natives, essentially, is what you're talking about.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
one of the things I'm curious about, because one of the things we certainly have seen for years and years and years is that whole, the fan fiction, the slash fiction, all that. How much of your stuff is original IP? How much of it is inspired by fans writing about characters they love from some narrative world and adapting that and creating something? And obviously you can make a lot of money off of that. I mean, the whole 50 Shades of Grey thing was somebody who was way into, what was it, Outlanders or something? I can't remember what she was into, something, and turned that into fan fiction that became a turgid series of best-selling books and then a turgid series of best-selling movies. Good on her, but that's fan fiction, essentially, that got dressed up. How much of your stuff would you say is sort of that fan slash ship stuff, and how much is like the original IP?
Yeah. So our model is we provide this UGC, user-generated content section. So anybody can come to that section. It's an open publishing platform. So anybody can start their series and build fans and start monetizing their content. And what we do is, because we have the first hand access to the data, so we can see, oh yeah, this person, this creator is trending and popular. So once we identify the next crop of talents, then what we do is we try to collaborate with those talents on completely new IP. So these are co-production of the new IP, and we kind of come in as a publisher. So these are the original content we're co-developing. So we're not just coming in as like a publisher in the sense where, hey, we just like fund the project, but we have awesome team of editors who involve and very deeply in the storytelling, and then work very closely with these creative talents. And so we're developing the new stories together, and we understand what's working well on the platform. So our editors come in and kind of develop the stories together from the get-go, and kind of affect the storytelling. So that's our model.
So one of the things I found interesting about the rise of TikTok is the way they use a whole series of signals. They don't get a big graph of your social connections and all that, and what kind of car you drive, and what you ordered for breakfast. They just put something on a screen, and how long you watch it, whether you like it, whether you follow the person. All those are little signs that this is something you should give that person more of. How do you find the signals of intent and interest, and how do you use that data to surface that next crop of stars?
So yeah, we look at, I would say it's similar to YouTube, where if you think about YouTube, your own YouTube experience and mine, so we can watch some videos, right? I mean, like YouTube is recommending all these videos, and then, you might watch one of them, but then sometimes you really like the content. So it's like, oh yeah, I want to see more. And then eventually you subscribe to the channel. I mean, for me personally, I don't really subscribe to the channel unless I have a very high level of confidence that this is really useful for me. So for me personally, subscription is is the strongest signal that I can send, to YouTube. So, and I'm sure YouTube has all these algorithms, and just like that, for us, yeah, we look at how people. So, like for us, within the content series, there's chapters or episodes. We call them episodes, and we can measure how many episodes people read. So you can imagine you go to a romance novel, and then you're like, oh yeah, reading like 7 chapters in a row. Then we can know that, oh yeah, this person is interested in this sector.
If they're binging on that romance novel, let's give them some more romance novels that are maybe in that space or somewhat like this.
And then subscribing to the series, that means, hey, I'm looking for the next episode to come out next week. So that's a very strong signal as well.
Real quickly, just again, everybody, put your LinkedIn profile, what you're looking for, who you are, all that cool stuff in the chat. Please ask questions of Chang. I will work them into the conversation, because I'm sure your questions are far smarter than I can ever hope to generate on my own. But luckily, I have a good audience, a good interview subject, so it makes it easy. So they can subscribe. How do they make money?
So we're using micropayment model.
Okay.
So
So
it's very
tips,
similar,
tips are like you buy it, or you have to buy it, or you can buy it, or is it?
but both. Yeah. So, and using the same micropayment model. So our model is very similar to mobile gaming, where, like you buy coins, basically the digital virtual currency,
Virtual currencies, yeah.
spending virtual currency for unlocking more stages or, like more stuff. So yeah, for us, it's a similar model where you can read the first like 5 chapters for free, and then to read more, you're spending the virtual currency to unlock more stories.
Okay, so there's a couple different ways for them to make money. Who's doing really well? Do you have off the top of your head a couple of creators who are, I don't know if cleaning up is quite the term, but making some money here that's worth talking about?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, we have creators that are making real money. Some of the creators are depending on their income on our platform. And yeah, we have this one of the top titles called The Beginning After the End, and the creator behind that is goes by this pen name Turtle Me. Why Turtle Me? I have no idea, but Turtle Me.
They like to pull their head in when they get done writing and hide, I guess. But
possibly, yeah, possibly. But yeah, this person is very successful on our platform. So for us, it's not just about the on-platform success. Obviously, we're taking these materials and then publishing on the platform and selling directly on the platform through the micropayment model. But we're also taking the IP and then selling to other places. Selling meaning like pitching, these properties for bigger business opportunities. So we have good relationship with production companies, studios, or even some of the other webcomic platforms in Asia. And by the way, this digital, serialized webcomics is a huge business in Asia. So we have massive platforms in Korea and China. So
it's worked out for Marvel also, I understand, but but the mobile space, serialized manga, anime, all that is done really, really well throughout Asia. Gigantic business. Anime is like a $20 billion business worldwide.
So we have Kakao of Korea, Tencent, QuaiCon. These are Chinese platforms, and they have like millions and millions of fans, and they're like consuming all this content. So we're exporting some of our titles to those places as well. So it's not just about publishing the story on our platform and monetizing directly, but doing all these other things. And if you're an individual creator, you could do it, but you don't have all these connections.
Right.
And you
so
gotta
you provide that you'll take it and try to pitch it and produce it because you've got a spin-off group that's focused on taking it to that next platform where there's some opportunities if you've got a good IP. Couple of questions here. Winston Perez, who was a very bad boy and put his question in the chat, and I noticed Jack Clark did too. You guys are bad people that you need to put them in the Q&A because, again, you need to acknowledge the limitations of the interrogator here. But Winston asks, what is the ideal profile of someone who's successful on the platform? So you mentioned a couple folks. What kind of creator does really well? What kind of stuff do they do? I mean, I'm guessing that they know the limitations and opportunities of a specific platform and they exploit those well. But what does that person look like in terms of how they create?
Yeah. So interestingly, the profile of the creators can be all different. We're seeing all these different walks of life. Some are students, some are professionals, some are like, they have like a day job, like whatever. But the stories that work really well on our platform, and I think this is the same across, like, we talked about other platforms in the space like Webtoon and Wattpad. I think the commonality there is it's more female driven content. So I mean, I think that tells you about the market opportunity, especially in the US market. If you think about comics in general, it's like Marvel, DC, you think about the Avengers and like, something that's appealing to like older
Men in tights, I get
guys, right? So it's like a very specific and very narrow, but I mean, we're talking about visual storytelling and anybody can be fans of visual stories, right? So,
but it tends to be a broader range. So it may be
exactly
more relationship driven stuff. It may be more,
romance,
we were talking, romance. You were talking K-pop dramas is a a really good fountainhead of, a certain kind of a sensibility that does well too, right?
Yeah, even the K-dramas, if you think about K-dramas,
yeah, K-drama,
Korean dramas, like people think, they're trying to figure out who are these people who are watching the Korean dramas. Is it like, hey, is it like Asians, or is it like, Latinos, or is it older people, younger people? But the commonality there is it's predominantly women. So I think there is an opportunity. There's dearth of content specifically targeted for women in general. So yeah, I mean, Hollywood, if you think about Hollywood, I mean, has been more male driven than female driven, I would argue. So especially when
I don't think you need to argue about that. We'll give you that one. We'll stipulate, to use Ned's sort of terminology in his Manat Phelps hat. We'll totally stipulate it's been more male driven. Certainly the big movies are focused on a largely young male audience. One anonymous attendee who my favorite questioner, because they always ask such penetrating questions and don't like to give their name, they must be related to Turtle, asks, will video formats be coming soon to your site and platform?
Well, we believe storytelling can take different forms, but right now we're sticking to novels and comics, and we're trying to partner with companies that understand, because I mean, video is a whole different animal. It's like completely different budget size, completely different production. So
a lot more hands are involved. You have a lot more people that have to be involved to get it from A to B, just to get it on screen, right?
Exactly. So we're completely relying on partnerships at this point. But in the future, who knows? I mean, we believe that storytelling can take different forms, but right now we're turning to partnerships.
Okay. Now, you mentioned Kakao. You all just announced, I guess it was a couple, 3 weeks ago, maybe it was not even that long ago, that you all are now bosom buddies. They have bought you guys. So what does that mean, and how, where do you go from here as part of Kakao? And first of all, tell people what Kakao is, because not everybody knows what Kakao is, and it's a big company, so they should learn about it if they don't know.
Yeah, Kakao is completely unknown, to be honest, in the US. I mean, it's a Korean company. So Kakao is I would say, so like in Korea, there are two sort of leading IT mobile companies, internet companies. So it's Naver and Kakao. And it's kind of similar to, if you are more familiar with the Chinese market, there's Alibaba and Tencent.
Never heard of them, but like that in everything though. But I mean, are they in everything the way Alibaba and Tencent are? I mean,
yeah, they're competing in pretty much every sector. So Naver and Kakao. So Kakao is they're best known for their mobile messaging platform called Kakao Talk, which is similar to WeChat in China. So in Korea, everybody and their mother, they're using Kakao Talk Messenger.
Oh, so to be clear, WeChat, I think, is fascinating because it's essentially become a replacement operating system across all those different mobile devices that have been, forked versions of Android and all that, and Apple. So you have all these different little functionalities and
Exactly.
applets that are built in, and you can do a bunch of different things like, get your Uber or your equivalent of Uber to pick you up, or pay your bills, or order food, or buy movie tickets when we buy movie tickets again. So it's like all that. Is it like that in Korea?
Yes,
with Kakao?
Kakao as well. So I think in general, Asia, there's this concept of super app. So it's like as you put it, it's almost like an operating system. So it's like a layer. And on top of the layer, there's like all this other services being plugged into, like a lifestyle services, and Kakao is like that too. So Kakao built, this platform using Kakao Talk. Now they have all these different verticals being plugged into that. And one of those verticals is obviously entertainment content. The company that's behind that is called Kakao Entertainment. So Kakao Entertainment is a subsidiary of Kakao, and they have like comics and IP and novels and TV drama, K-pop, like everything. So
another reason why you don't need to get video is you've now got a corporate sibling that does video that's in that stack, at least in Korea, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's one component of that. You don't want to duplicate what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, we might do some content partnership with Kakao Entertainment in terms of those videos in the future, but right now we're focusing more on bringing their original IP, like digital comics, to the US market. So Kakao Entertainment and Tapas have always been kind of partners. They were investor in our company, and now they bought out everything.
Now they really invested.
Yeah, really invested. So they always wanted to launch in the US market. But then, like typically, and I think they're being smart here, because a lot of Asian companies, they want to launch directly in the US market. But it's like after burning through a lot of money, they're like, oh yeah, maybe like it's better play to work with a local player who understands the local, consumers. And that's what Kakao did with us.
Yeah. Okay.
So, yeah.
Sasha Wallinger asked, I think, a fascinating question, because it's great to get your share of the digital currencies that go through. I'm sure you all skim your operating costs as needed from that stuff, but there are other ways to make money. And one that she asked is, how are brands reaching out to partner with your authors, and are they looking to connect in a sponsored way, in a product placement way, in some other fashion, in standalone ads that run through? I mean, how do they work within what you've got going on?
Well, to be completely honest with you, we don't have a lot of brand partnership yet with our creators and content, but in the future, I mean, basically all the things that you just mentioned are possible areas, right? It can be product placement, it can be sponsorship. A lot of brands want to get behind this independent indie creator movement. So you can imagine, hey, like Pepsi is supporting, like we're supporting indie creators, and then they don't really get into the storytelling. Like creators can tell whatever the stories they want to tell, but it's like, hey, as a brand, we're getting behind that movement. So yeah, in the future, there can be brand partnerships that way.
Sasha says she has ideas and she's looking for you, and she's looking forward to connecting. So make sure and connect you guys. Jack Clark wants to know if you're licensing short form video content, and if so, how do you use it? Now, what I'm hearing is you're not licensing it, but you're trying to figure out how you take that IP and do things with that out to, whether it's your Kakao corporate siblings, or beyond that in Hollywood and elsewhere, right?
Yeah, so we're already working closely with some of the Hollywood production companies. There's a company called Madison Wells Media. J.G. Pritzker founded the company, and they're bona fide sort of like, so why do I say Silicon Valley? Hollywood.
Well, because Silicon Valley has now bought Hollywood. I don't know if you noticed that, but basically there's a couple of little stray studios that are 100 years old that haven't been bought up yet, but
Amazon bought the MGM, right? So
yeah.
But Madison Wells Media, we're close partners with them. So we pitched our IP to them, and then what they did was to kind of package that, and then pitching to studios for Netflix shows and streaming shows, TV film opportunities, animations. Like a lot of our stuff is really animation material. So
yeah, I mean, it's like storyboards for animation.
Exactly.
Effectively, right? It's like just do some tweening and you're rolling. So
it's like a beta testing storytelling. So sometimes we actually work the other way, which is like, hey, these production companies, they have a lot of ideas, but they want to test the market first. So in that case, we bring their scripts or original stories, and then kind of produce them into the vertical scroll comics.
So you find the talent based on your stable of people, and say, here's a really interesting story. Here's somebody who's done work in that area. Let's have them do this. And I mean, it's a little bit like what's been going on with podcasts, right? So podcasts have become market testers, market creators for specific kinds of IP that then go up to the more expensive film or limited run series projects in the last 3 years. So it's kind of like that, but it's like let's try it on a less crazy scale first with this story, and flesh out some of it and figure it out. That's an interesting approach. So Judy Havas asks, now you talked about your target demographic, millennials and younger, skewing female. But she is curious about how many folks? You got like what, 65,000 contributors, I guess, is what the number I seem to recall. But where are you operating, and where are your opportunities for growth from here now that you have that big money corporate parent?
Yeah. So obviously, we're going to continue investing in the creator community and original IP development. So we're bringing a lot of content from Kakao and other Asian partners, but these are more like I mean, if you think about like Netflix, right? I mean, Netflix used to be almost like 100% licensing business. So they built a platform, and all their content was licensed from somewhere in the beginning, but then they now, they've been investing heavily in the original IP, original content. So now, like, if you go to Netflix, it's like you're getting a feeling that this is like a movie company, TV company, with their
they're
original.
spending $17 billion. I mean, they did do a deal with Sony on some the first window of the first pay window with Sony, and that's a smaller studio that's now decided that they're Switzerland. They're a studio for hire, basically, for everybody, which is an interesting model, and one it's probably sustainable, particularly when you have a bunch of video game money coming in from PlayStation. So
So similar to that.
They're licensing around the world. They're creating their own. They're producing in co-partnerships and all that. So that's an opportunity, clearly.
Yeah. So we're licensing. We'll continue licensing. It's not like the licensing will stop. I mean, that business will continue growing. We're going to work more with with more publishers and more content providers and whatnot. But in the meantime, continue investing in the original IP development, which is a big investment for us because these comic series, novel series. I mean, especially nowadays, like after Netflix, Netflix produces everything in advance and then like publishing at the same time. So you have a lot of lead time, which is kind of crazy. So for us, like developing all these original stories, and then especially like with a lot of episodes before, ready before launch. So that's a long-term investment, but it's definitely worth it. So we're going to continue investing in original IP.
That's kind of Netflix's challenge too, right? So Netflix drops everything. So it's not like in the traditional TV, they would produce episode 1 and get that ready for air, and maybe episode 2, and then they'd start working on 3 when 1 is airing, or 4, and then keep changing the show and evolving it over a season's time. But they're shooting as they go through that season, and Netflix gets it all done, and then they get it in, I don't know, 15 million languages or something. I don't know how many they do. I think it's 20. So they got to do it. They got to localize it for all that. Now, are you all localizing on top of sort of dropping it all in a bingeable format?
Yeah, localization, because we're bringing a lot of content from Asia. Localization is such an important area, and people think that, hey, localization, like, what's a big deal? You're just like translating, but it's actually a pretty big deal. I mean, you're almost like recreating the stories. If you just translate, then it sounds very awkward, and you're like reading completely different stories. So we have a team of people who are really experts at this point in localizing Asian content so that we can publish those in English. So
I gotta think that there's got to be some challenges with like the way sometimes it's just the turns of phrase, or the slang words that get lost, or the references to some historical thing that don't translate well. I mean, China's got 5,000 years of history. Korea's got 4,999 years of history. I mean, they got a lot to pull from and refer to, right? I mean, it's just doesn't resonate over here in some ways.
Which is why sometimes it might be an awesome story in Asia, but then like it may not translate really well, even though no matter how good good job you do for localization, still the story may not work, especially like contemporary. I mean, you can think about the US version of that too, right? Like US, like you have a lot of things going on in the US, and unless you're American, you can't really understand exactly what that means. Like one example, somebody was telling me, and this person is actually English as a first language speaker. He is from South Africa. And then when he first came to the US, it's like everyone was talking about March Madness. And he was like getting prepared for it. It's like he was thinking that's like a bad thing. It's like
he was thinking the purge or something, right?
Yeah, purge or looting or something. So he's like, what is going on here? Should I be get ready?
Should I be worried? Do I need to get a weapon?
Yeah, he was getting worried. So it's like, March Madness, like you don't understand that until so yeah, there's a lot of those cultural nuances
Sure.
when you bring content from outside. But if you think about, there are stories that are more translatable, right? Like a fantasy world, fantasy stories, you're actually creating your own world. So like Harry Potter, I mean, that's almost like a, neutral language, right? Like a lot of stuff that's in there is, you're in Brazil, or like whatever, Switzerland, like you understand the same thing. So yeah, typically when stories are more like fantasy stories where the world has been created, these are stories that are more
It's not this world, it's a different world. It's a lot easier. Like you're going to get there however you get there, right? So
right.
yeah, you're going to be transported. Nick Blake asks, what was your inspiration for the platform? And I mean, how did you get started? How did you decide short form, mobile, and not Quibi? And we're not going to raise $1.75 billion and spend it all. How did you? I mean, that must have been a tough decision. But how did you focus on what you focused on? How did you go there? Yeah,
I heard some jokes where like 1.7 billion is like, it's like a metric unit, like it's like one Quibi. So it's like
one Quibi, yes, absolutely.
3.4 is like 2 Quibis.
Yeah, yeah. So MGM's going for 6 Quibis, I guess, or something like that. 5.5 Quibis. Yeah,
yeah, 5.5 Quibis. Yeah, the inspiration was actually, so like before this life, I was at Google as a product manager. So I'm not coming from like Hollywood or storytelling world. So I'm an outsider. But my thing is, I'm a technology person. I used to work at Google as a product manager. Before that, I was I ran my first startup, which was a blogging software company. This was back in Korea. So I was born and raised in Korea, and I know the Korean market really well, and the US market as well. So when
what kind of product were you managing for Google? I'm just curious. What was your area?
Yeah, so blogger.com, which was by Blogspot.
So that makes more sense, because you're going from UGC in UGC 1.0, right? Blogging.
Yes.
To typically on a computer and in a web browser, to mobile and shorter form and quicker turnarounds and all that. I mean, it's like you just pulled all that into now. Right?
Exactly. So I feel like this is very much a continuation of what I've been doing, because blogging, obviously, that's a great way to express your story. Remember like Web 2.0, like what year was this? Like 2007, 2008, like around
about the time that the iPhone came out.
Yes, yes.
And a couple of years after that, about the time 4G phone networks came out. Yeah, right. All those two things together made a bunch of stuff possible and transformed stuff.
Yeah, Web 2.0, I mean, was all the rage, and blogging was at the center of it. And it was all about like, like web used to be just like consuming like one way, but now you're able to express yourself. So, that was the beginning. And now, fast forward, post Netflix, I mean, everybody is potentially, storytellers. And I was telling, David about this recently, but, if you think about the Netflix world, I mean, like we're living in this post Netflix world, and there's so many platforms out there, OTT platforms, and within each platform, the content is really like, personalized, and there's so many different stories for these small niche audience. So Netflix is not just like a one giant thing, but it's like a sum of all these like a small niches, which means that it's like an explosion of storytelling. They need so many new stories, and if you multiply that, so it's just like Netflix only, but if you multiply that with all these different platforms across the world, then it's like an explosion of storytelling. So going back to the question, what was the inspiration? We looked at the Asian market and saw the uprising, like like platforms like Tapas was already there. Like sometimes if you look at China market, if you look at Korea market, there are some interesting business models that come out there first. But hey, how come this has never been introduced in the US market or global market? Right. So we wanted to look at those opportunities, and especially from the user generated content angle. And we saw, the emergence of these platforms, quote unquote webtoons, which was great way to build IP for individual creators. And what was really amazing about these platforms was it wasn't just about the platform consumption, but these were really great way to build IP that became TV shows and movies and all of that. So yeah, so we got inspiration, a lot of inspiration from the success of the Asian models.
Okay, so like a lot of folks, you looked east and said, "Oh, there's some stuff working over there." I mean, we're going through that right now with e-commerce. So people are live streaming commerce, right? Everybody's like, "Oh my God, it's a $90 billion business or whatever it is this week." In China, why hasn't it gotten big over here? Amazon in particular is going, why hasn't it worked over here? We'd like to sell a whole lot more stuff, but I see Twitter saying, for instance, their executives just said, you're going to be clicking and buying on Twitter all the time soon, and et cetera, et cetera. Instagram's all into it, and Facebook. So Winston Perez asks an interesting question. Congrats on the success so far, he says, but what is ultimate success for you and your company, other than getting bought by one of the major media technology companies in Asia?
Yeah, I mean, for us, this is really the beginning, we think, and it's not just like, I mean, I know like every entrepreneur who sells a company, they're like, oh yeah, this is not the end, this is the beginning, and we're like, yeah, right. But I mean, I really mean it, because like this is content business, and with the backing of a bigger company, we can invest more aggressively in the content. When we were a small startup, then when you're a small startup, you're always under the pressure of raising money and funding, and you're always small in terms of resource. But in the meantime, like this is content business, which means you need to continuously invest in the content and development and IP. So yeah, hopefully we're going to be doing the same thing, but with more scale. That's exactly what we want to do. The ultimate success, our vision is to build the best platform for storytellers, period, right? So we want to build this awesome platform and community for storytellers. And the result, the outcome of that is we want to build this IP powerhouse. Right now we have about 80 to 85 original IP. But by the end of next year, we're looking at about 200 original IP, and then it's going to continue growing, just because there's more creators coming into the platform, and we look at the data, see which ones are the top ones, and then continue developing, continue developing stories, working with those talents. So it's like a platform approach, and we expect the original IP development to be skyrocketing, and then yeah, like each year we're going to pump out this awesome IP. That was never seen by anybody else. So it's like a new IP, keep growing. And then ultimately get into this IP related businesses like TV, film, animation, and all these other things, merchandising even. So that's the future, that's the vision for us.
So Zach Obando, coming off of that comment, had a pertinent question. Since you're hoping to work with more and more original IP, how are you currently managing all the stuff you got? I mean, 65,000 creators, you said 85 original IP that you guys think have some opportunities here. That feels like a lot for a modestly sized startup. So how are you doing that?
Yeah, obviously, it's tough. So first of all, for UGC section, user-generated content section, we're not really touching their content. So like one thing that you don't want to do is to, when you have a creators, for them, their works, their creation is their baby. And not try to, you shouldn't.
Their baby and their teenager and their fully adult.
Exactly.
Yeah, all of
so
that.
You shouldn't try to like take the ownership or do something funny with them. So that's an absolute no. So we're just like providing this space where people can publish their story. We help them.
It's a showcase, is what you're saying. That's a showcase for them. But out of that, if they can build an audience, you can take that and say, okay, we've got this other thing we're going to run with, right?
Exactly. Yeah, so creating the very a very friendly terms with the content creators is really, really important.
Okay, so build a relationship, and then you guys can do some business, as they say in Texas. So at this point, I think I am supposed to turn this back over to Ned. I will say, however, you can reach me, David Bloom. I write for Forbes and a bunch of other outlets. You can reach me on LinkedIn at David L. Bloom and on Twitter at David Bloom, at David Bloom. Chang, where could people reach you?
Yeah, let me leave my LinkedIn address on the chat section.
Absolutely. So why don't you do that? And folks, grab it and connect with Chang, and you guys can talk IP and brands. And Sasha, you can go to town with all the people you know and everybody else, and make everybody happy. So I get a cut though, damn it. So anyway, Ned, back to you, sir.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Chang. And by the way, we should comment that your backgrounds are so appropriate with the Los Angeles sign and the beach. Great to have you guys on the show. Chang, congratulations on the acquisition and all that you're doing in the space. It's really a testament to your hard work and a great concept you've developed with Tapas. So great to have you on the show. Folks, tomorrow is our games day, the business of games, and we have the founding team at Manticore Games, and Mike Vorhaus will be our moderator for the show. So join us tomorrow at noon Pacific. Have a great day, everybody. Take care.
Thanks.